right, welcome to today's episode of Tomorrow's Leader, where we dive deep on all things leader related to leading yourself and, of course, leading other people. And relating to leading yourself, I've got a fantastic guest on today, and I think you're going to pull away exactly that message, the importance of leading yourself. And I've got Fred Schuldt, who is the author of the book, Keep Showing Up, a fascinating story, someone who I've gotten a chance to talk to over the last few weeks and learn a ton from. He's a financial advisor and been a financial advisor helping people impact their financial lives and their lives overall for the last 20 years. He's a husband, a father, a youth athletic coach, and a cancer survivor with an amazing story. So Fred, welcome. Great to have you on the show.
Thank you very much. I'm honored to be here, John. Thank you.
Absolutely. So Fred, there's so much I really would love to talk to you about. We had such a great conversation the other day. And I know the audience here is going to be able to learn a lot from your journey. So maybe just the best place to start is to enlighten us a little bit and take us back. And just let's hear a little bit about your journey and what you have really gone through.
I appreciate that. I think that first off, anyone listening or watching should know that I'm just a regular guy who had no idea that I was going to go on some sort of journey that was going to transform how I live and think and feel. I just one day found myself struggling to hold on. I was 30 years old when it all started, and I had just started my financial planning practice. I had a year-old baby at home. My wife and I had just bought our first home. I had become an independent contractor, so I had expenses and all this other stuff, and I wasn't taking care of myself. I was burning the candle at both ends, trying to start the business. I had some health issues that sort of I let go unchecked. And on a Saturday morning, I was home with my daughter. My wife was at the gym, and my intestines ruptured, and crawled to the phone and called my parents, got rushed to the hospital. But the hospital made a mistake and sent me home. So yeah, I was really sick. We had my mother's birthday party at the house. I went to put my shirt and tie on Monday morning and went to the office. And Monday night, next thing you know, went for a CAT scan that was scheduled. And they were scurrying around saying, Mr. Schuldt, you need to be, admitted. And I said, when? They said, now. And I was like, yeah, but I'm in short-term parking, right? Even when we're in the middle of something, we just don't think that bad things can happen to us. And
you felt okay at that point?
No, I was sick, but I was unwilling to admit it. I had appointments tomorrow with clients. I do the nighttime feeding with my daughter. Like, I wanted to go home and maybe come back to the hospital tomorrow afternoon. And meanwhile, I was already essentially fighting for my life.
And you didn't even know it?
No.
Wow.
No. And so 5 days later, they did a 14-hour-long surgery. They opened me up from my sternum down, and I woke up the next morning to 58 staples and a colostomy bag and tubes coming out and in every part of my body. And 3 times that night after surgery, I stopped breathing. They were waking me up.
Wow.
And telling Mr. Schuldt, you have to breathe. And it hit me. Oh my God, I'm Mr. Schuldt now. I have a baby. And in fact, my wife was 4 weeks pregnant with my son, and we hadn't even told the family yet. And there I was struggling to breathe.
Wow. So you were conscious during that point when you're struggling to breathe, or they told you about that afterwards?
No, I have memories of it. Essentially, I heard the machine beeping, the long beep, and then they would rush in and remind me to breathe. I had been over medicated and was too weak from the surgery. And so I was aware. And then the second time, I remember hearing the long beep on the machine and being aware, but they rushed back in and sort of woke me and got me to start breathing again. And I had to force myself to stay awake and breathe. And then a third time, I just started to fade out. And they rushed back in. There was a big argument between doctors and nurses. I remember yelling and screaming and talk of someone potentially killing me. Yeah.
Oh my gosh. So it's like, they're frantic around you trying to.
They were frantic between the anesthesiologist who had gone into another surgery and the nurse who had given me extra pain medicine. And then I was shutting down.
Did you have a moment? Did you think you were not going to make it?
I was scared. That's as scared as I've ever been. I was really scared, and I was just thinking about my wife and my daughter and my unborn child, and just trying to make myself breathe.
Oh, wow.
You know,
Was
and
your wife
then
there when this was happening, or was she at the hospital or in the room?
oh yeah, I think by that point, you know, my wife was there with my parents. That's actually when she told them, oh, by the way, I'm pregnant.
Wow. Oh.
And then I believe she was home with my daughter. It was the middle of the night by that time. My surgery was over 14 hours long. So
Mhm.
this was the middle of the night when this was happening,
Wow.
unbeknownst to anyone in my family.
Unreal. So
Yeah.
what?
So
Yeah.
wake up the next morning and you know, there it is. I was wrecked. I went in the day before, you know, when I went in, felt healthy. I was 30 years old, father, skier, you know, outdoorsman, and felt like I was at the top of the world, you know, and, you know, 6, 7 days later, I was a mess.
Wow. So you had that. So you were living this active outdoor lifestyle,
Yeah.
athletic, and you didn't have any idea. I mean, until that Saturday morning, you didn't have any, idea that you were on this
Yeah,
trajectory.
I knew that I had it. I knew that in the family there was a diverticulitis, an intestinal issue, and I knew that I was going to have to deal with it at some point. I had, in fact, had a conversation with the doctor the week before saying, well, I'll have that surgery, doc, but maybe we can do it in a year or two once my financial planning practice is settled.
Mm.
And he was like, all right, well, we'll schedule you for a CAT scan on Monday. And then that Saturday is when essentially my intestines ruptured inside of me.
So thank God you had the CAT scan set up, right? Because you wouldn't have
Yeah.
gone in that night, right?
Well,
And
I went to the hospital that day, but unfortunately they made a mistake and said, well,
exactly.
you're already scheduled for a CAT scan Monday night, so go home, come back Monday.
Wow.
And so 2 days I went into septic shock and had blood poisoning because of the ruptured intestine going unchecked. I should have had emergency surgery the day when I went to the emergency room.
Wow, that is incredible. Wow.
Yeah.
So you have this surgery, and then what's the recovery like? What happens after that?
It was, you know, about another 10, 12 days in the hospital. And eventually they sent me home. I was dealing with the colostomy bag and how to do that. A couple weeks later, I was going back to the office. I was an independent contractor. I had a growing financial planning practice and people counting on me. I had to hold a pillow over my stitches to hold it together, and my wife would drive me to the office, and I would essentially hold on to the filing cabinets to make it into my little office. And the first day, maybe I was able to go through the mail and go through my email, and then go home and come back the next day and do a little more, and just day by day showing up and trying to make it through, you know. And somehow I did, and somehow the practice kept growing, and I just got enough money coming in. I just got a referral, or had some clients call that were retiring, or had a rollover, or whatever. Somehow my business we just made it. And 6 months later, I went back in. I had my second major surgery, and it was about a 13-hour long surgery to open me up again and put it all back together. Which is essentially what they weren't able to do the first time. And so they removed the colostomy and reattached my intestines and put it all back together again. Another 58 staples opened up again, and couple of weeks to recover. And then it's time to go to the office, honey, get me the pillow and hold the pillow over the stomach and
Wow.
get into the office. And I went back to work on a Monday in September, and it was a good day. I got a couple of referrals. People were glad I was back in the office, and just call my uncle or whatever. And I remember saying to my partner, Joe, that day, like, I can't wait for tomorrow. Can't wait for tomorrow, you know, to get this thing going again. And woke up that next day. It was a Tuesday morning in September. I was driving my daughter to town, and we live about a half hour outside of New York City. And I was driving my daughter over to my parents' house because they watched her on Tuesdays. And I heard that a plane hit the second tower in the World Trade Center. And I knew right away it was terrorism. It was this beautiful blue sunny day. You can't fly a plane into that building by accident.
Right.
And, you know, got to my parents' house with my daughter, and the television was on. And yeah, it wasn't the day we thought it was going to be. You know, eventually got my daughter back from my parents, picked up my wife from work, and we went home. not knowing what was happening here, right? Like, were we being attacked? And,
Wow.
so that wasn't the day I thought it was going to be.
Oh my God.
And it wasn't the day any of us thought it was
Oh,
going to be, right?
yeah. I think anybody that was, alive at that point, you remember that day vividly. If you're old enough to be part of that day, and I just remember the emotions of that day. If you were healthy and you had everything in your life going great, it was such a devastating period of time. But here you are, you are going through your own unbelievable, obstacles and challenges and everything like that. I can't even imagine that. You're dealing with your own, issues, and then you have this as well. I mean, what was that? What was going through your mind at that point?
Oh, it was crazy because, right away I was struggling with some complications from the surgery, whether I could digest or not. My wife was now due in another 6 or 7 weeks. And, certainly everything changed with the conversations with my clients. It went from talking about their money to finding out if they were okay, if their family was okay, are they alive? I live 20 minutes from New York City, so that's our backyard.
Mm.
And it was tough here. It was really tough. But in a way, it was a wake-up call for me because I was already starting to have a little bit of a victim come in. Why me? Why I got to go through all this? And I think that was a wake-up call because I think you got it bad, Fred.
Yeah. Wow.
You're here. You're
So that
alive.
changed your mentality a lot.
Yeah. And so for me, it was a wake-up call.
Wow.
And I just did what we all did, like hung up the flag, prayed, and the sun came up the next morning. And that's the thing. The sun comes up the next morning, no matter what's going on. Even after 9/11, the sun comes up the next morning for all of us. And we have to find a way to show up, move forward,
Yeah.
and do it. So that's where I was. I was just in full out Indian war paint. I'm going to battle here. And I had a wife, kids, clients counting on me. Another baby on the way. So there was no way I could do anything but just keep showing up and go at it.
Yeah.
And we all did as a country. We just kept moving forward. And
I just remember, I mean, life was so heavy at that point. I mean, it was just,
yeah,
you didn't want to laugh. It took so long for people for even to watch a comedy or something. I mean, it feel like it was okay to, live life and enjoy life. It was incredibly difficult time. Unbelievable.
yeah. And for us here, right outside New York City, the sirens were always ringing. You could always hear sirens 24 hours a day. And the funerals went on for the firemen and the police. The funerals went on for months and months.
Yeah.
And so it was a heavy, heavy time. It was a heavy time for me. But I just had to do what I had to do. And somehow, I made it through. I was in and out of the hospital on and off a liquid diet, but during that time, my son was born, so was it a bad year for me personally? In some ways, yes, but it was also one of the greatest years of my life. Like, there's beauty when there's struggle too, and you just have to look for it.
Mm-hmm.
So when I look back on that year, I don't really look back on the bad times. I really look back on the fact that I was lucky to have my son and he was lucky to have me.
Did it take you a while to get that perspective though, or is that the version of you now, or?
No, I think pretty much right away I was like, wow, I stopped breathing 3 times. This was almost really different for everybody. And it instantly started a change in me, to reprioritize what was really important and to try to find a way to really appreciate everything that I had, regardless of the struggles, because I mean, Sydney and Andrew almost didn't have a dad. And for me, I almost didn't get to be their dad, so,
Wow.
it was pretty instant that I knew I was given a great second chance.
Wow.
It could have been a lot different.
Yeah.
And so I think instantly it changed the perspective, but I was still struggling. I still had knots in my intestines. So some days I could digest and some days I couldn't. And, it was starting to affect me being able to be the outdoorsman that I am. Every time I went skiing, my intestines would essentially block up and maybe have to go into the hospital or go on a liquid diet. I was really, really thin. and hated the way I looked. Did not like wearing short sleeve shirts or anything like that.
Wow.
And but my financial practice was growing, and my kids were healthy, and life was relatively good. I just had this one struggle with food,
Yeah.
and what I could and couldn't eat, and what I could and couldn't digest, and what I couldn't do. So eventually the doctor decided that I was going to have a third major surgery. Like, they don't want to keep doing intestinal surgeries. It just causes more scar tissue, but it was really impacting whether I could do what I wanted to do in my life. And I was young.
Mm-hmm.
Most people don't have their intestines rupture when they're 30.
Mm-hmm.
So, the doctor decided to go in. They did a third major surgery to take some bad parts of my intestine out and get rid of a knot. And I went in for that surgery. And that's the first time I started to cry. I was in the doctor's office with my wife, and found out that I was going to have the third surgery right after Christmas, before the new year started. I wanted to get it in before work got busy. And I realized I wasn't going to be able to ski for the winter. So, like, I had this tear going down my face, and my wife Lisa's like, "Oh, are you okay? What are you crying about?" I said, "I can't believe I'm not going to be able to ski this winter." And she said, "That's what you're going to cry about?" But that's something I love. It's like air for me. And the thought that I was going to miss another ski season for another surgery, I was starting to get a little angry and down. And so the day of the surgery, I go in, it's delayed. And so they put me in this waiting room, and I turned on the television, and started to get angry. And it's the day of the tsunami in Southeast Asia, and thousands of people were dying. So once again, I had this instant wake-up call. Like, there you are, Fred, complaining about a surgery that's going to help you live a better life, and there's thousands of people right now dying, and there's tens of thousands losing their family members in their homes, and you think you got it bad, Fred. That was the second time where I really had a stark wake-up call to you think you got it bad? You're alive.
Amazing. That's amazing perspective. And I remember that vividly too. And it's incredible what had happened, but it's also, you could have very easily gone down a bad place, and you certainly were well entitled, and certainly nobody would ever question why you would be in a really negative place after all that. But you flipped your perspective totally. That's pretty.
Yeah, at that point again, I was just feeling, how lucky am I? and then that surgery was a success. So now I'm able to eat, and I can gain some weight, and I can get healthy again. And I start coaching a youth athlete. I start coaching soccer in town. I'm coaching 4 soccer teams. I'm coaching rec and select, and coaching boys and girls. I'm a coordinator of the program. My practice is going. My kids are, now 5 and 7, and everything's going awesome. And I was past it, and I was always going to have a little pain every day and some scar tissue and whatever. But
you could eat normally. Could you ski and everything like that?
Yeah, like I was able to ski again without problems, and everything was getting great, and so that was really awesome. And then I went away for a ski trip, and I got home, and my wife Lisa's like, "Hey, you got to call the doctor. She wants to talk to you about your results." It's diligent with the doctor after all that, and going for an annual physical. And a couple of weeks before, when I went for the physical, she said, "Fred, prostate cancer runs in your family, and you're 37. We normally would do our first PSA at age 40 for someone like you. But we're taking blood, like maybe I should do it." And you could see it literally, like it hit her from out of the blue. And I just said, "Sure, doc, same blood." She said, "Yes, well, go nuts, test it for whatever you want."
Yeah.
Not thinking anything. So went off on my ski trip. Wife gets home, got to call the doctor, get on the phone. "Doc, the prostate?" And she says, "Yeah, your number's really high." And so next thing you know, I'm going to see a urologist and having a biopsy for prostate cancer. And it comes back negative. And they're like, "Oh, don't worry, you're going to be fine. Just go live your life and come back in 6 months."
Wow.
So I try not to worry, and, coaching and
Were
fishing
you worried
free.
though? I mean, you had still
I
high.
was a little worried. My history wasn't all that great, and yeah, most people don't get prostate cancer at age 39, but most don't have their intestines rupture at age 30 either, So I was nervous, but trying not to allow it to get into my head. I had fought really hard at that point to get healthy. Certainly, it had me spending even more time in the outdoors because that's where I find peace. And I was feeling even more motivated to spend time with my children and teach them and make memories with them, because once again, I'm feeling like I'm not so sure how long I'm going to be around. So go back in for the second biopsy. That one comes back negative. So like, oh, you're going to be fine, Fred. Don't worry at all. Come back in 6 months. And 6 months later, I had my third biopsy, and walking down the hallway with my wife, holding hands, and she's crying. And my wife doesn't cry very often, but she's crying because I just got diagnosed with prostate cancer after all that. And I'm 39 years old, and I don't really have a choice for treatments. I have to go have a radical surgery to remove my prostate, which is going to come with, potentially sexual dysfunction, and I won't be able to have children anymore. And a period of time where I will definitely have incontinence and be in a diaper. So, I'd already had those 3 surgeries, and I'm facing my 4th major surgery in 10 years. And I had that surgery, and there was a bunch of complications because of all the scar tissue from my other surgeries. So even that was impacted. Even now getting cancer, it's still impacted by that decision that the hot people made to send me home all those years ago.
How soon did you have that surgery?
Well, I had you gotta wait like 6 or 7 weeks to heal up from the biopsy before they can do the surgery. So I think it was 6 or 7 weeks. We went to Disney World, made some memories with our kids, and the next week I came home and went in for my 4th major surgery. And what got harder for me was the first surgery. I was, ignorance is bliss. I had no idea what I was getting into. Every day was new, and I was just dealing with whatever was put on me. But a lot after you go through something like that. So the second surgery, you have to give yourself up. You have to give control of yourself up, knowing what's coming. Yeah. And knowing that recovery is never going to be what the doctors say it's going to be, and then because it's always going to be okay. It's going to be easy. You're going to do fine. And then so the third surgery, you're giving yourself up again for this. And then by the 4th surgery, I don't want to give up my body. I don't want to give up control of myself like this again. And then there were complications and a blocked catheter afterwards. And eventually I was literally crying in the recovery room, begging them to let my wife come in while they tried to get the doctor to come back in, and they would have to remove the block. And I was in horrible pain. And what was supposed to be a quick 2-hour surgery was 8.5 hours and 6 hours in the recovery room. And I walked in a healthy 30, pretty much feeling like a healthy 39-year-old the day before. And I went home once again, having basically been hit by a truck, and there I was back at home on the couch again. And this time it was a global financial crisis going on.
Wow.
Yeah. So, I needed to be my strongest for myself and for my clients and for my practice and for my kids. And I wasn't.
You're getting right back into work right after this. I mean, there's no downtime. There's no.
Home on the couch for a couple of weeks, taking Percocet, feeling like crap. That's not good for me. I got to get off of that. Yeah. When I say going back to work, I don't know, maybe I was at the office for an hour the first day, maybe, an hour the second, maybe the next Monday I was in for 2 hours,
Yeah.
I was just going in and doing whatever I could each day, and then going back home. And if I had to crash on the couch, I would. But I went through a really dark period for those 2 or 3 weeks on the couch, in the dark, wearing a diaper, holding the dog, watching old war movies I'd watched with my dad growing up or something, like I was in a really dark place. And as the stock market continued to spiral out of control, 2008 into 2009, and everybody was freaking out. And yeah, I hit rock bottom too. Spirit, mind, and body, I was done. Depression, anxiety, loathing. I hated myself. I hated being me. I really wasn't functioning well if I wasn't with other people. When I was on my own, I could never seem to catch my breath. I couldn't sleep. I was just waiting for the next shoe to drop for me or my clients or whatever. And I just couldn't get out of the anxiety and stress from the trauma. I got stuck in an angry victim place. Why me? Am I being punished? What did I do to deserve this? I don't really like me. I don't want to be me anymore.
I can't imagine that. I can't even imagine going through, one, let alone, these multiple surgeries and you think you're in the clear and then you've got prostate cancer. So how you got that in and of itself is unbelievably just a huge thing to deal with. And then you're dealing with the financial stuff on top of the financial crisis and everything like that. I mean, was there a point where you're just like, okay, you got to block everything out? Or, I mean, how do you deal with that at that point?
I wasn't really dealing well with it. I wasn't being as proactive as I needed to be with my clients. I was answering the phone when it rang, like, but I should have been on the phone with everybody, and like I always was. And I couldn't make outward bound calls. I couldn't do the one thing that a financial advisor needs to do more than anything else.
But did they know what you were going through? Did they know what was happening?
Some of them did, and some of them left me because of it. I can't have my money during a global financial crisis with someone who's sick with cancer. That's literally what somebody told me, who I had been with him through his wife's cancer and his mom dying and everything else.
Wow.
So yeah, it was tough. I lost some clients, and where's the next client going to come from? Who's going to move money now? Who's doing anything, right? So it was scary. It was really scary. Financially, it was scary. And I was in the worst place I'd ever been in emotionally.
Wow. How is what's happening with your family at that point? I mean, how is it, what kind of toll is it taking on them? I mean,
I have an incredible, beautiful, amazing wife. And so Lisa kept everything going. She kept the kids unaware. They were young. They didn't know.
How old were they at this point?
Let's see, Sydney would have been in the 3rd grade and Andrew was in the 1st grade.
Wow. So they really didn't, did they not know at all, or
they knew Daddy had to have something in his stomach fixed, because I had a surgery site and they couldn't jump on me and things like that. They knew that Daddy had to have something fixed in his stomach.
Yeah.
But that's really all they knew at that point in their life. So, but my wife, Lisa, at that point, I had to take care of me, and she took care of everything else. Wow. And I'm super blessed that she showed up for her vows in that way. I mean, you vow to be with someone in good times and in bad, for rich or for poor, in sickness and in health. But she had no idea what she was getting into when she did that. Mm-hmm. And then, she showed up every day. So my kids were great because they got a great mom. Wow. And so I was able to just say, what do you got to do so that they could have a great dad too, Fred? Yeah. So at that point, I was rock bottom, and thankfully my best friend one day on the phone was like, Freddie, I get it. I'll never forget him saying this. What you've been through, it's perverted. No one should have to go through that. It's perverse. But I got to ask you, what are you going to do about it? When are you going to get up and fight? What are you waiting for? And I didn't have an answer for him. I hung up the phone that day, and I was like, yeah, what am I going to get up and fight? What am I waiting for? And I've been fighting for my wife and for my kids and for my clients, but it didn't stop me hitting rock bottom. And I made a decision. I was worth it. I'm worth it. And I deserve a full and meaningful life. And so that's what I was going to do. And after we hung up, I sat in my office for about an hour, and I had a card for a therapist on my desk for a while that a good friend of mine had given me. And I finally made the phone call and said, I need help. I was able to do it all along because I'm blessed with incredible people in my life, and I'm strong. But at that point, I couldn't do it anymore. And I needed to admit the hardest part, that I got to get some help. So
a lot of strength to do that.
So I made the phone call, and then I wrote down on a piece of paper, spirit, mind, and body. And I decided to make goals, because that's what you do in financial planning. And so I said, spiritually, where am I, and where do I want to be, and what's the most next natural step? And I feel cursed, and I want to feel blessed again. And the next step is, I have a very good friend of mine who has since passed away, but he's a priest. And I just wrote, go see Peter. And then I wrote body, where am I? Where do I want it to be? What's the most natural step? And I just felt destroyed. But I have a young wife at home, and I wanted to get my sexual function back. And so that first step was, where is it? I can't even have sex with my wife. Where do I want to be? I want to be in a healthy, physical relationship with my wife. And what's the next most natural step? Go see the doctor again. What else can we do? Because it wasn't working for me. And then, my mind, where am I? I'm anxious and scared, and I want to be strong and confident again. And what's the most natural step? Go see the therapist. And so I started this journey of just writing down, where am I now? Where do I want to be? And now what's the next step? And I would try something. If it worked, I would do more of it. If it wasn't really for me, I would cross it off the list and go try something else. And
in those three areas: spirit, mind, body.
Spirit, mind, body.
Wow.
It's all connected. And when one thing gets knocked down, it all gets knocked down to some extent. And to build it back up, you've got to build it all back up. Or to stay optimal, you have to have it staying all three of those areas. Spirit, mind, and body. If your body is not there, it's going to affect the other parts. It's going to affect your emotions. It's going to affect your spirit side. If you don't connect spiritually, and I'm not talking religion, but if you don't have a spiritual side, if you're not connected to the bigger, greater things around us, that's going to impact you during times of trouble. And if your mind's not right, you're obviously not going to be able to take care of your body right, and those other things. So, I realized that if I was going to get my mind and my body back up again, I had to focus on all three. And I was spirit, mind, and body done. I felt cursed. I was anxious and depressed, and my body was wrecked after 10 years of surgery.
Wow. I can't imagine. Yeah. I mean, that is such a good point. You cannot have, if one is out and you can't have the other. The other two are not working. They're all connected.
They're not going to be able to be optimal. No. They're not going to be at their peak.
Yeah.
And so, yes, I had a spirit, mind, and body plan that I kept going back to on a regular basis. And if something worked, I'd do more. If something didn't, I'd cross it out and try other things. Yeah. I went to a nutritionist, went to a therapist. I went to a Reiki healer. It was an interesting experience, but not for me. I read some books. I started to ride a bike. I, consciously made time for spending more time outdoors. I kept coaching kids, which for me, that was huge. That was my refuge during the storm. When I got cancer, the guys who ran soccer came to me like, "Oh, Fred, anything you need, we'll take your team." And I was like, "Don't you dare. No, you're not taking my team. Like I need this." And so also for me, the refuge from the storm at night was getting to go to the field under the lights and be with our treasure, our true treasure, which is our kids, and they're all great. And so to go into that place of being with third, fourth, fifth, sixth, seventh, eighth, whatever grades they were, as I went through that process, to be with those kids each night, and the purity of kids and the truthfulness of kids and the innocence. And it was getting to have an impact on kids who don't have a dad, or, things like that. Every night getting to go to the field with the kids was huge for me. And that was sort of my refuge.
That was, I can't imagine. I mean, that's your light. That's your, bright spot. And I hear a couple things that really stick out. You're going through this journey. One, you're setting goals, but you're also basing where you are in reality today and where you're trying to get to. But you weren't afraid to ask for help, and you also weren't afraid to try a lot of different things, which I think that sounds, and that's different. A lot of people want to just fight their own battles themselves, and okay, let me just figure it out. I know a lot of people that are like this. Hey, they don't even want to ask for help. They just want to figure it out or try to figure it out themselves.
And that was me for the first 10 years.
Yeah.
Right? I did it myself. People at the office used to joke I was like those clowns you had when you were a kid that were weighted down and you knock it down and it just comes right back up.
Yeah.
That was me for the first 3 surgeries. I wasn't woe is me, and I had some moments and things, but on a daily basis, I was getting up and fighting and going and moving and not letting this stop me, from living a full life. But by the 4th time, I just ran out of steam.
Yeah.
I ran out of what it took. But also you have to understand, we all have to get to a point where we realize what used to work doesn't work anymore.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the point where I got to. Everything I had been doing, the way I was fighting for other people and the way it got me through where I was, it got me to survive, right? But surviving is not fun. Surviving is not fulfilling. And I wanted something that was fun again. I wanted to be fun again. I wanted to be fulfilled again. And the best word I could come up with, and it's kind of trite or whatever, is thriving. Like I felt like, well, great, I survived, and I've never been able to come up with a better word. And I've tried, believe me, but I felt this. And then when I went to a life coach. You're talking about getting uncomfortable. I went to a woman life coach who was actually my client as financial advisor. And then I was going to open up to her from this whole other side. Right. So yeah, I learned to get uncomfortable, but I also learned that I had to find a new way, because on my own, I was surviving, but I wanted to thrive again.
Mm-hmm.
I wanted to feel fully alive again. And I don't think we can do that alone. We might be able to get through, get by, manage things, survive on our own, but I don't know anyone who's thriving on their own.
You need help.
Yes.
When did things start? When did you kind of sense that, okay, I'm now starting to thrive, or at least in the direction of that?
Well, about 1.5 years in, I was done with therapy. I felt like I got what I wanted to get out of that. I worked really hard in therapy, and it's a lot of work. If you're going to do it, don't do it unless you're prepared to work really, really hard and dig really deep. But I did that, and I dealt with the things that I felt at the time I needed to deal with to fly on my own again. But then I hired a life coach, because I was like, okay, now I'm just back to stable. Like I got myself back, but I wanted more than that.
Mm-hmm.
It wasn't enough to just be out of trauma,
Mm-hmm.
to just be out of anxiety. Now that I've gotten here, out of the trauma, out of the anxiety, now that I can be fully present again, now what am I going to do with this? And so that's where I hired a life coach and started saying, what am I going to do with all this? I had done acting, and I was always a good presenter, and I love telling stories, and now I've got this story, and so that's when I went to a life coach, and we started like exploring what I was going to do with it, but hadn't really figured that out. And in the meantime, I was back. Now it was 2012, and I really felt back. And so I went heli skiing in British Columbia with my best friend. It was like to celebrate. Well, we always planned to do it. It happened to coincide when I was 4 years cancer-free. And at the 4-year mark, you basically go to have testing like any other man over 40. So it was like a moment to be past it. And we always talked about going heli skiing together. And so that was our annual ski trip that year. And we went heli skiing to celebrate beating cancer. And I got to the top of the world, and I saw the view, and the tears just started to come down, because I realized, oh my God, I did it. I did it. I did it? Like, I did it. I'd gone from the worst possible place, and now not only was I on the top of the world heli skiing, but I felt it again.
Yeah.
And I realized I did it, and I knew I needed to share my story. I knew that there are so many other people out there getting knocked down all the time. And I knew that from just interactions I had with people, that I gave people hope. I gave them hope, and I gave them some perspective. that maybe their life wasn't so bad.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I gave them that same moment that I got in the hospital thinking, you think you got it bad, Fred. Well, now my story seems to give other people that, wow, I thought I had it bad, Fred.
Mm.
You know, and it gave people hope that you could get back up again. And so I knew I needed to share my story. So I had a friend who used to work in television and had a little studio in his basement. And I had footage from a little video camera of the helicopter landing at the top of the world and then taking off over us and disappearing in the view. And we kind of wrote, produced, recorded a 3-minute and 12-second video where in it I shared what it was like for me and my wife, me and my kids, the kids I coach, and my clients as I got cancer, and what it was like as I fought it, and what it's like now that I beat it. And I just kind of put it up on like Facebook or whatever to share with friends and family, like to inspire people just that way. I just kind of threw it up there as the first time sharing my story. And in the end of it, I just kind of off the cuff recorded, I'm Coach Fred. Because I went on that journey looking for Freddie, the confident, happy person I was when it all started. And at the end of the journey, I found he was gone and never coming back. And I found this new person, Coach Fred, you know, a grateful husband and father, youth athletic coach, financial advisor, cancer survivor, whatever. But I really liked being Coach Fred. And so I just put that out there as just because I liked when the kids called me Coach Fred at night and their parents called me Coach Fred around town. I was like, oh, I like this. This is fun. And then it happened to be that a leader from the company I worked for saw it and asked if he could share it. And the next thing you know, I'm getting this email from the president of the company in New York City asking if this is a Fortune, 200 company, asking if I would come in the city and share my story with her. And I did. And then they asked me to give a speech at a conference. And I was like, oh, that'll be fun. Share my story for the first time. I spent 2 or 3 months with my life coach because now we figured out sort of what I was going to do with this. And I spent 3 or 4 months kind of developing how I would share my story. Because I had been sharing it, little pieces here and there with people as I interacted, but I'd never shared the whole thing before. And so I worked diligently to do a good job. And I went down and I shared my story for the first time. And as I looked around the room, people were laughing and then they were crying and then they were standing up and cheering at the end. And they couldn't believe I'd never given a speech before. And I was like, that was awesome. Called up my wife, like, oh, it's really fun being a motivational speaker. I'm on my way home, honey, and start driving home from Baltimore. And I get a text from the executive vice president of the company who was there saying, that was amazing. I need to see, more people need to hear you, Fred. And would you be the keynote speaker at our national leadership conference? And I'm like, okay. And so next thing you know, I'm showing up at a national leadership conference. And again, I share my story from the heart and they laugh, they cry, they stand up and cheer. And then they're like, do you have a business card and a website? And we want you to come here or there. I'm like, well, I guess I can come. And like, all right, I'll get a business card. And like, I never had a plan to be a motivational speaker. I just did one speech and people wanted to hear more of it and they wanted to share it with the people in their lives. So people who heard it would then ask me to come to their place and I would share it with more people and people would hear it and ask me to come. And I spent the next 2 years crisscrossing the country, sharing my story with 30, 40,000 people.
That's amazing.
That you can get knocked down, you can get up again, but you can't do it alone.
When you were speaking in front of that first group and you see their reaction and they're applauding, they're crying, they're laughing. How did you feel at the end of that? Were you just like, wow, did you feel like your story would resonate and impact people the way it did and you'd affect people that way?
Well, to be honest, I knew that it probably would.
Yeah.
I like telling stories. I've always told stories.
Yeah.
I'm comfortable up on stage from, high school and college and, youth theater and music and things like that. So I was comfortable up on stage.
Yeah.
I knew that I was going to just rip open my heart and there was not going to be any slides and, any music or any fancy presentations. I just played that video that I shared for the first time. And then I got up and shared my story, much like I've shared it with you today.
Yeah.
I haven't changed much in what I do. I just open up and share about how I got knocked down, how I got back up again, and how I was only able to do it because of the other people in my life.
Wow. Unbelievable. And are you, and I know you've written a book. Why don't you tell people about the book and also where they can get it? Cause obviously it's your story in even more detail.
Yeah, well, so in 2014, my cancer came back. We won't get into that. I beat it again. So I'm a 2-time cancer survivor now. And then after that, about 2016, I decided that I needed to stop going out on the road, and I needed to show up for what mattered most in my life, which was my home, my wife and my kids. I missed out on too much, and I was finally fully present, but yet now I'm in a hotel in California and trying to red-eye home so I could coach the kids that I love. And so I eventually made a decision to stop motivational speaking and just go home. But I had this, what happened is people started calling me and reaching out to me for the next year or so because they had seen me or heard me and my story had an impact, or they were able to have an impact. And eventually I knew I needed to keep sharing the story. I was just selfishly not wanting to go out on the road to do it. I wanted to be home. I wanted to go to the soccer games, lacrosse games, and concerts and family dinners. And I wanted to be home for all of it. I didn't want to miss another minute.
Mm-hmm.
But I knew I needed to keep sharing my story because it gives hope. So I decided to write my book, and in it I tell my story, but I think more importantly, I really delve into what I learned, the mistakes I made, the things I didn't do well, and what I wish I knew. And I delve more into the process of how I got up. And in the book, there's some worksheets. I take people through that whole idea of having a spirit, mind, and body plan. And I've added one thing since then is impact. So now my plan also says, where am I with the impact that I'm having? What's the impact I want to have? And what's my next step to have that impact? So I have added one piece to my spirit, mind, and body plan, which I think we all want to have an impact on others in any small way that we can. It doesn't mean writing books or motivational speaking or doing podcasts. There are those of us who are called to do some things like that, but my thing is I want people to show up for what matters most in their life,
mm-hmm.
and have an impact where they can. Maybe it's in their own home.
Mm-hmm.
So that's why I wrote the book. You can find it on Amazon. It's called Keep Showing Up. And you can just search that, and you will find it. You can search Fred Schuldt, and you will also find it that way.
Okay, and we'll put the link in the podcast notes. And are you out now doing, or will you, when COVID is ending, back to doing some of those keynotes, or what's your?
Yeah, so the interesting thing is my daughter is leaving for college in a couple weeks. My son leaves for college next week, online and things like that, but they're both leaving the home. And I've always kind of pegged this year for the year where I would start to explore how I could go out and start sharing my story again. And it's kind of starting to happen already. Once I told a couple people in my life that, yeah, it's time. I've done a couple of interviews like this, and I'm doing a couple of online events for some people who want to bring me in front of their clients and share my message. So I am doing some online speaking during COVID, and I do plan to probably, more next year now, look at ways to promote the book and get out and start sharing my story again, because, my kids are not in the house, and I feel like I've sort of finished what I needed to finish there.
Yeah.
Before I could freely give again elsewhere.
So you've got a lot of people that are listening that are dealing with their own struggles or battles or internal fights or external issues, and are in dark places. I mean, right now in the midst of COVID, I think everybody's anxiety and stress and maybe depression is pushed. What advice would you give to somebody who's going through, maybe not what you've gone through, of course, but something that's deep and dark and troublesome for them? What would you tell them?
Well, I think the most important thing to remember is where you are right now today is not where you're always going to be, and have hope.
Mm-hmm.
Some of that darkness comes from thinking this is it. This is what it's always going to be like. And I know for me that was that way. When I really hit my worst, I was afraid that this is me now. This is what it's going to be like for me. And I think you need to have hope first. Remember that where you are today is not where you're always going to be. And you can get up again. That's what I would tell everybody first off, that you can get up again. I think the second piece of advice I would say is, if something's hard, you have to admit it and then get help. So don't tell yourself that it's okay, it's not that big of a deal, that I can handle this on my own. Admit that you're having a hard time. Admit that the struggle is real. This is hard. And it's okay when things get hard. And then go get the help you need. Or reach out to somebody. Don't think we can do it all alone. So first off, have hope. It's not always going to be this way. Mm-hmm. Second off, find the courage to ask for help from somebody. Mm-hmm. And then the third thing I would say is, it's not going to happen overnight. Transformation is a whole bunch of small changes. And if you want to live differently, start with one change. You know, that's why my plan was spirit, mind, and body. And I didn't have 15 things written down for each part. I had one thing written down. I'm going to do this one thing from my spiritual side. I'm going to do this one thing now for my body. I'm going to do this one thing for my mind. And I learned through financial planning that too often people get wrapped up in that there's 12 things to do, or 15 things to do. The plan has just too many details. And when you're struggling, you can't handle that much future. So I would think that remember where you are is not where you're going to be. Have hope you can get up. Find some help if you can. And remember, you just have to take one step today. Just one. And then take one step tomorrow. And the final thing I would say is, remember that our 100% isn't always the same. I gave 100% every day throughout this battle, but my 100% sometimes was woeful in comparison to my 100% when I'm feeling great. And our 100% is not going to be the same every day. So all we can control is that we show up with all of who we are today. So have hope, get some help. Don't get overwhelmed. It's only one step at a time.
Excellent. Amazing advice. Unbelievably inspiring story. And congrats on what you've accomplished. And so happy to hear you're healthy, you're feeling great. And I love your new version of yourself. It's an unbelievable story, and I got a lot out of it. So thank you for being so, open and sharing it with us. Appreciate it.
Thank you for giving me the opportunity to share, John. I appreciate it.
You got it.
I hope everybody gets one small thing out of it they can take away today.
They will. So we've been here with Coach Fred. Book Keep Showing Up, out on Amazon. Again, the link is in the podcast notes. This has been an absolute pleasure, and we look forward to seeing you out there also on the speaking circuit. I'm sure you will, for sure. So thanks again, Fred. Thanks again, everybody, for listening. Keep liking, keep sharing, add your comments, your suggestions, subscribe. Your feedback certainly matters to me. Want to make this show better and better. And of course, have great guests like Fred share their inspiring stories. So enjoy your day, and thanks for joining.